Hey everyone, it's really great to see some of the wellness coordinators that I work with and also some new faces. So let me share my screen and we can get started. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about wellness as a practice in awareness. And what it really comes down to is exploring wellness and self-care through the truth that we can't pour from an empty cup. And I really love this graphic because I feel like it helps us kind of understand what might be things that fill that cup and kind of help us to be excited and aware and in the present moment when we're working through all of the roles that we have. Because I know that you're here as wellness coordinators, but you also have a lot of other roles too, just like I do and just like everyone else here today. So really it's about being aware of your wants and needs first in order to support everyone else. And this is one of my favorite topics to talk about with teachers, with families, with students, definitely with the Crush team too. So I'm really happy that I get to share some of this knowledge with you today. So first, I would just like to know what wellness means to you. So you can use the poll everywhere link if you still have it open or text it in, and we'll start to see some of your ideas come up.
This is like a question it could be just as hard as you want it to be.
Yeah, exactly. It can mean anything and everything. Nice. I'm seeing a lot of body-mind connection, which is definitely something we're going to be talking about. Stress is definitely something that's related to wellness too. That holistic idea, so having it be in all areas of your life. Awesome. Feeling energized, being balanced, having presence. Yeah, you guys definitely have a good idea of what wellness can mean. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to keep going. So I love this definition of wellness, and you guys kind of hit it right on the head. Holistic wellness is really the integration of physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. So it's about fueling the body, so getting that physical wellness in, engaging the mind, and also nurturing the spirit. And to me, wellness is really a professional and personal responsibility. A lack of well-being can absolutely affect those we serve in our families and our friends and ourselves. So practicing wellness and self-care, to me, becomes an ethical imperative, especially when you think about the idea of doing no harm to those that we're working with. So sometimes it kind of gets glossed over. I think the wellness idea, it's something that we kind of put on the back burner because we have so many other things to do. But really it should be a foundation and the path forward in order to do our work effectively. So this is a visual tool called the Wellness Wheel. I've used this wheel with students that I've worked with teachers, with staff, to assess and gain awareness of their states of wellness and how they relate. Wellness can be viewed a lot of different ways and in different dimensions. You've probably seen these words before in relation to wellness, or you might have seen others that are related. So what I've tried to do is focus on 8 dimensions of wellness that have been researched, and I use the model from the University of Maryland. So you may see different variations, and that's okay. But really what I want to hone in on is the fact that these are related, and this model can really help us to kind of reflect and see how all of them are connected. So we'll be doing an activity using this just a bit later where I'll ask you to reflect on these different areas and kind of rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. So what the wellness wheel does, you'll see that, we've got 8 pipe pieces and these different circles that kind of go around and get bigger and bigger. And the idea is that you're rating yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. And if you're in that 1 to 3 area, if you feel like that area of wellness really isn't developed, or it's an area that you're kind of suffering in, that would be a low score. And then as we build up to that 10, the 10 is thriving. and kind of that 4 to 6 range, that middle range, the average range is surviving. So I've seen students, and other people use it differently. Some students will be like, you know what, a 5 is really good for me. A 5 is average, and that's where I want to be at. Where other people, they'll hit that 10 in a lot of different areas. So it's not meant to be punitive or really a rating scale. I hate to use the word rate, but I can't really think of another word to use. But it's more just to create awareness, to gain awareness of how all these ebb and flow together. So what I'm going to do now is go through each of the different areas of wellness, starting with physical and going around the horn, and just sharing a bit of knowledge that I find helpful in the literature as far as how we can kind of conceptualize this and make this stuff real to us. So the first one that I want to go on is physical wellness. And one of the most important ideas that I've learned is that the absence of illness does not equal the presence of wellness. So this illness wellness continuum model was created by John Travis in the early 70s, and it was really just geared towards conventional medicine. But I really like to look at it to apply it to schools, because I feel a lot of times our work is done in this treatment paradigm where how do we get our students back on track? How do we get them to neutral? How do we get them to average, right? So how do we get them to that neutral point where there's no really problems going on, but I don't really have time to support their thriving? You know, that can kind of be the reality sometimes in schools. At least that's what I've experienced as being a school psychologist. We have all these ideas for prevention, for mindfulness, for bringing all these great wellness initiatives in. We can't find that time and that place, or maybe that's not a priority of the district or the administration, right? So I challenge us to think of physical wellness in a new way. So how can we support the wellness of students through awareness, education, and growth of their physical well-being? And that really lays the foundation for those higher order kind of areas of wellness that I'm going to get into. So this really just means supporting sleep, diet, physical activity, empowering them to make good choices so that they can continue to be active, healthy, and happy in the future and as adults. So, you know, what is our role in this area? I have to think that it's about putting our physical wellness high on our priority list as role models, so we can be a good example for everyone we work with, our students, our peers, administration too. And so just kind of creating that strong foundation for these other areas. So this is the next one, which, you know, is probably of great interest to us working in schools, because our kids are there to learn. And most of the time we focus on that academic piece as a barometer of success in schools. So I've combined intellectual and academic to kind of talk about both our students' experiences and also our continued intellectual kind of cognitive growth. So when I see this picture, I think neurons that fire together, wire together. And you've probably heard that term before, and I love it because it's all about associative learning, in that every experience, lesson, and feeling that we have triggers thousands of neurons in our brains. And when we repeat those experiences over and over, the brain learns to react in the same way. So there's several different cortical networks in our brain that help with this. So we have our midline brain, which kind of runs, you know, down the middle of our brain. In the front of our brain, you know, we have that prefrontal cortex where there's that planning, organizing, performing tasks, problem solving. And then as we work our way to the back, there's another area that focuses on daydreaming, attention wandering, kind of the doing is what the midline cortical networks are for, all of the doing. But then we also have lateral networks in our brains, which focus more on the being. And this has to do more with holistic processing. So figuring out how all that information plays together and plays into our sensation, our gut feelings, and really our internal body sensations, and also presence and moment awareness. So these two networks engage in something called reciprocal inhibition, which really means when one is busy and one is firing and working, the other one is suppressed and not being strengthened. So unfortunately, a lot of the work that we do each day is through the midline network. So it's a lot of the planning, organizing, performing tasks, right? Daydreaming, wanting to be in a different place, so mind traveling. And that's kind of how kids are too. The modern schooling system is kind of built on this midline network. So how I like to think of this area of wellness is how can we activate skills every day that support that lateral, that being, and that being in the present moment. So some ideas that have kind of come to mind are supporting mindfulness in the classroom and in our daily lives. So it's not only a practice, a formal practice, but it's also an informal practice too, of going throughout our day mindfully. Also curiosity, creativity, having different perspectives, responsible decision-making is also something that comes to mind, and also critical thinking. And if you want to know more about kind of those ways, the doing and the being parts of the brain, a book called Neurodharma by Rick Hansen is a great resource and something that's been really powerful in my studies. The next one is a bit lighter, recreational wellness. So this, obviously, as it sounds, downtime, hobbies, building new skills, whatever really helps you unwind and enjoy life and encourage curiosity with the world around you. So I think of this one as a great way to talk about self-care, social wellness, fitness. I mean, as you'll see, all of these different areas of wellness are interconnected, right? So this one is really whatever you want it to be and whatever helps you to enjoy life. Next is social wellness. And this model that I've kind of used to represent this area of wellness is Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory. And this was a big part of my undergraduate research and how my my program at DU is oriented. So this is how we view our work in schools as school psychologists, and that all of these systems, micro, meso, exo, macro, they all interact and respond to the health of the other and to the health of the individual. So they're constantly shifting around the student and shaping their worldview, their interests, their ability to take care of themselves too. And then think about if a student experiences trauma, if they have a dysfunctional family, if they experience a natural disaster, if there's death or chronic illness. And what about disabilities, mental illness, a physical disability? So there's all these individual differences that all kind of ripple out into the different systems. And then we also have to think about the intersectionality of the person when it comes to their race, their gender, their class, the culture that they grew up in. So at this one, it's really complex and there's a lot at play, and just kind of bringing awareness to the fact that there's a lot to consider when you think about how and why a student shows up the way that they do into your classroom or into your school. So some areas to kind of focus on with social wellness is that we need to work on encouraging an active part in improving our communities, which you guys are doing, by being wellness coordinators, absolutely. It's all about connection with each other, establishing supportive and effective social networks, developing meaningful relationships with one another, and also creating safe and inclusive spaces for everyone at the school. Next is emotional wellness, which I think is an extremely important one, given that I'm a mental health professional. So this hierarchy of health needs is really a play on Maslow and his foundational needs of establishing safety throughout your life. So starting with internal safety, physiological safety, working our way up in order to kind of self-actualize or find ourselves as humans, as effective humans. So I like this one just because it helps to kind of show what we need in order to be emotionally well. So encompassing optimism, self-esteem, and self-acceptance, the ability to cope with feelings independently and also interpersonally. So having your own view of your feelings and also understanding how they might impact other people. This definitely includes practicing self-care, finding resources and in order to support your resiliency. Also, again, with creating satisfying relationships, being able to empathize with others, and also, knowing when to ask for help. So, and all with the idea that there's hope whenever you're struggling with a mental illness or someone else that you have is struggling with something. So I really love this graphic, because there's so many pieces at play with emotional wellness and how do we support coping strategies for kids, right? And this all kind of plays into that overall area. So the next is spiritual wellness, and this is really probably one of the most personal areas, and it looks different to everyone. I really like this Venn diagram because it hones in on thinking about our individual experience of spirituality. So at its core, it really is about seeking and having meaning or purpose in life and living out your values through your actions. It doesn't have to mean following a religion or believing in a higher power, but it certainly can. So there's really a lot of creativity and exploring within this dimension throughout someone's life, and that it can ebb and flow based on life experiences, and really the desire to dive into answering these questions too. And really what matters here, I think, is that whatever practices make sense for you and your belief system, that it also encourages that holistic mind, body, and soul connection in order to achieve that kind of area of wellness. Environmental wellness really inspires us to live a lifestyle that's respectful of our surroundings. So it can mean sustainability of our earth. It can also mean looking at our social and built environments and how that lends themselves to illness and wellness. The social environments obviously can touch on racism, sexism, bullying in schools, right? The overall school climate. And we also, thinking about on a more macro level, what are the resources we need to survive? What are they available? How are our living conditions? And especially in light of COVID, our environments have certainly changed, and we've been asked to work, to go to school, and to live our personal lives in spaces that we may not be used to. So this area of wellness gets at how we manage our environment in that little kind of micro level, and also the macro levels of how is this all connected, and how is everyone experiencing a similar struggle and kind of thing right now with the pandemic. So this was one that I really honed in on with my students last year when I worked at DU with students with disabilities, because they were freshmen in college and they had to go home and move at home and also access the quarters, so they thought they had all this independence with them, and being a freshman in college at DU and then having that kind of pulled away from them. And how do we navigate creating boundaries of, hey, I might be at home, but I'm also working in school. Let me put up a sign on my door that says, my school hours are 8 to 3. This is when I have class. Creating boundaries, creating that space and that respect seems to be really important in this age that we're in. Next is financial and occupational wellness. And, I could sit here and talk about planning for the future as far as, finances go and work satisfaction, right? But what I really want to share with you guys is this concept of ikigai. And it's a Japanese concept that means a reason for being. And it also means having a direction or a purpose in life. And this concept comes from the Japanese island of Okinawa, which is said to be home to the largest population of centenarians in the world. So the largest population of people who have lived over 100 years old. So Okinawa has been identified as one of the blue zones in our world. If you're familiar with Dan Buettner, and he has identified these different zones where people live together and grow really old and are really healthy. And he's found that it's about a sense of community. It's about a certain diet, and also just respect for the elderly. So what this kind of model gets at is we have to have a combination of, what we love, what we're good at, what can you be paid for, and what the world needs. And all of these things kind of go towards your reason for being. So I would just ask you to kind of reflect on what those different things, kind of how to fill this in, and see maybe what you have going for you and what is kind of lacking, and how can we kind of make this a more whole model for you. And what he suggests doing, Dan Buettner, is making 3 lists: your values, one of things you like to do, and one of things that you're good at. And the cross section of these 3 things is your ikigai. So we've gone through the 8 dimensions of wellness. This is an example of how a wellness wheel can be filled out. And I did this at the start of quarantine as a model for my students. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do now is to just spend 3 to 5 minutes and to fill out the wellness wheel on your own. And just keeping in mind that, these dimensions of wellness are mutually interdependent, meaning that they pull on one another. And so this self-awareness really comes from seeing how they all work and flow together, and maybe where there's some conflict too. So you can, Andrea just sent a link to the wellness wheel. I found that it's really helpful if you have a Mac to pull it into preview, and you can color it in just like this, or if you just want to write down your ratings for each of them. If you don't have access to coloring it, just thinking about where you are on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 kind of in that suffering, 1 to 3 suffering, 4 to 6 surviving, 7 to 10 thriving. And, you know, feel free to turn off your camera if you want like some space, and I'll bring us back in a few minutes.
So Ellie, just so I'm clear, we're doing 5 minutes right now where everybody's going to try to complete the wellness wheel on their own.
Yes. Yes. And this activity will inform our breakout session.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into my email. So if that's another place you can get the PDF. And then at the top of when you open the PDF, there's a editing kind of pen at the top. And then you can kind of like the model here, you can write on it yourself if you want to. And if anybody has questions, feel free to chat any of us.
I'll just give you guys about another minute and then we'll continue. All right, so to kind of operationalize these dimensions of wellness, we start by taking charge of our habits. 40% of our daily behaviors are formed by habits, and really our habits are simply a formula that our brains follow. It's a system of patterns that we've embedded in us over time. And if we reduce our indecisive behaviors to be more efficient routines, it frees up energy for wellness activities and for future planning. Habits have the power to form our sense of wellness, and new habits take on average about 66 days to form. And as we know, and from experience, habits are difficult to break. So we need to rewire our brains with stronger, more positive habits. So a tool like the Wellness Wheel is a great place to start to gain more self-awareness about our habits and areas of wellness that we've been ignoring or putting on hold or avoiding. So this awareness of our habits can really help us to pay more attention to what our body, our mind, and our spirit needs in order to thrive, not just to survive or get by. After all, and this is one of my favorite quotes, self-care alone is not enough. You need to have self-awareness too. So the combination of self-care and that awareness that we put behind it really equals self-love and that self-compassion that we can all struggle with from time to time. And in such a time of uncertainty, we need to focus on what we can control. So these practices that we want to instill in ourselves should be simple, and they can be healthy eating, our water intake, adequate sleep, creating professional and personal boundaries, positive stress management. And what it really comes down to is that, stress ebbs and flows, but our self-care can anchor us. And one thing I really want to stress is, if you learn nothing else from this presentation, is that wellness is not an end goal. It's an ongoing process, and it's really a journey that lasts your entire life. So this is what I call the SelfCare Equation. And this is what we're going to be working on in our partners in our breakout groups a little bit later on. So I just want to quickly orient. So how I kind of see it is that we need to have a broad intention for each area of wellness. And what that can sound like is it's super simple and super broad. So for emotional wellness, practicing gratitude, that can be your intention or your purpose or your focus, right? And then under that, we list a specific goal. So we have this overarching intention that we want to put out, right? And then we also have a goal to get us there. So for example, for physical wellness, that could mean doing weekly meal prep. So it's kind of the work, the idea, and then the work, or the intention and then the work. So this is what we're going to be doing in small groups, and I can answer any questions when we get to that part about how to fill it out. So really, self-care looks different to everyone. And because our bodies, our minds, and we have different needs and wants, right? So we have to find the activities that work for us. And my equation is going to look probably a lot different than yours, or maybe similar. But the point is that we do it as it aligns with our priorities. And I just want to leave you with this quote. True wellness means feeling calm, energized, and having the tools to get back there when you don't. So we're not going to be 10s in every area all the time, and we're not supposed to be, but it's really important that we have a toolbox there and ready for us to access whenever we do need to get ourselves back to feeling better than neutral. Thank you, everyone.
For more information about Project ECHO and upcoming ECHOs with the University of Denver, please visit mortgage.du.edu/ECHO or follow us on Twitter at ECHO_DU_MCE. Thanks for watching.